My father told me girls don't go to college. He said it the way he said everything: steady, certain, final. Like a door closing. I was 12 years old, sitting at the kitchen table telling my older brother Dwayne about my plan. I had the whole thing mapped out. Science teacher. The kind who made things click. Like the teacher from that episode of the Magic School Bus where the bus shrinks down and goes into Ralphie's bloodstream, fighting off the infection like a tiny army. I don't even know how old I was the first time I saw that episode. I just know I watched it and thought, That's what I want to do. I want to take the invisible, impossible things and make a child's eyes go wide. I had a plan. I had a brain. I had the grades to prove it. And then my father walked through the kitchen, caught the tail end of what I was saying, and said 4 words that rearranged everything. Girls don't go to college. That was the day I stopped believing the future was mine to choose. What I didn't know yet, what took me 12 more years to understand, was that the day my father said those words was also the day I started building my resistance. Quietly, slowly. The way water finds the crack in the stone and doesn't stop until it gets through. This is the story of how I got through. I wasn't the top of my class, but I had a brain that liked to work. I liked the moment when something confusing suddenly made sense. I liked writing neat answers and seeing the red check mark. I liked being called on and knowing the answer. I carried mostly A grades all the way through elementary school, and I walked into middle school already thinking about college. Not in a vague daydream way, in a planning way. What kind of grades would I need? What field I'd study? How I'd become the kind of teacher who made kids feel like science was a secret the world wanted to share with them. I know, it sounds a lot for a 12-year-old, but that's just how my brain ran. Dwayne, my older brother, was sitting at the kitchen table with me that afternoon. I was talking his ear off about universities, about how I'd need to keep my grades up, about science programs. He was half listening the way older brothers do, flipping through something, nodding when the pauses got too long. It didn't matter. I wasn't really talking to him. I was talking out loud to myself, rehearsing the future. That's when my father came in. John Matthews did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. When he spoke, the room adjusted. He set his glass on the counter and looked at me. "What are you over there going on about?" I told him. College, science, teaching. He didn't pause. He didn't soften it. "Girls don't go to college, Cheryl." I sat very still. "Your job is to learn how to run a house, get a job that will make you a better homemaker. Find a good man. That's what matters." Dwayne didn't say anything. He looked down at whatever was in his hands. The room had shifted into that particular quiet that meant the conversation was over, not because it had been resolved, but because John Matthews had spoken, and in our house, that was the same thing. I said, "Yes, sir," because that was what you said. He took his glass and walked out of the kitchen. I sat at that table for another few minutes. Dwayne finally looked up at me, and I could see that he felt bad about something. About not saying anything, maybe. Or maybe just about the general unfairness of it. But he didn't speak, and I didn't ask him to. In our house, we did not go against John Matthews. No one did. My mother Nadine set the example. She agreed with my father the way a compass agrees with north. Automatic, constant. Not because she had no mind of her own, I think, but because somewhere along the way she had decided that agreement was easier than the alternative. My father had always been proud of my grades. He had attended every school awards night, had posted my good report cards on the refrigerator with a magnet. I had believed that meant something. I had believed that his pride and my ambition were pointing in the same direction. That afternoon I understood they were not. And something in me, something small and essential, went very quiet. I didn't talk about it. I hid the feeling the way you hide a bruise, by not pressing on it in front of anyone. But that spring, when I was 13, my report card came in the mail, and for the first time since elementary school, there were no A's. There were only 2 B grades and a row of C's, neat and final. My father saw it first. He came to find me in the living room, the card in his hand, his voice controlled and tight. "What happened here?" "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" "You know. What happened to your grades?" "I don't know, Dad." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he went to find my mother. I heard them from my bedroom. The walls in our house were thin, or maybe his voice just carried. He was blaming her, saying she wasn't supervising me properly, that she was letting things slip. My mother's voice was low, agreeable. Whatever explanation she offered it carefully. The next morning, she came to my room alone. She sat on the edge of my bed and folded her hands in her lap the way she did when she was choosing her words. "Cheryl, talk to me. What's going on with school?" I looked at her. I had not planned to tell her, but the answer came out before I could stop it. "What's the point?" I said. "Dad told me girls don't go to college, so what does it matter what my grades are? I'm not going anywhere." She was quiet. I watched her face. That small tightening around the eyes, the pause before she answered. "He said that to you?" "At the kitchen table a few months ago with Dwayne." She was quiet again, and then she surprised me. "Your grades still matter," she said. "Even if college isn't an option right now, when you apply for jobs, they ask for transcripts. They look at what you did in school. A bad record follows you." I opened my mouth to say that's not the point, but she wasn't finished. "And Cheryl, Black people in this country fought for 200 years for the right to sit in a classroom. They were beaten for it, killed for it. They did that so you could learn. You don't throw that away." I heard her. I understood the argument. But I want to be honest, that wasn't what turned me around. What turned me around was Deidre Hall. Deidre had been in my class since elementary school. We weren't friends, we were competitors, which is a different thing entirely. Deidre was smart, maybe a little smarter than me, and the teachers adored her, which I found unreasonably irritating. She got the praise that I wanted. She got the gold stars, the glowing comments on tests, the way adults' faces changed when she walked into a room, and I had been sitting there getting C's while she kept acing everything. That thought, small and petty and entirely mine, was more motivating than anything my mother said about history. I picked my grades back up, not for justice, not for legacy, because I was not going to let Deidre Hall beat me. I'm a little embarrassed by that now, but only a little. I went through middle school and then high school doing what I was supposed to do. I worked hard. I got my grades back up. I sat in classes and absorbed everything I was given, and I did it knowing it would lead nowhere. That's the specific grief of it, not just being barred from something, but watching yourself be excellent at exactly the thing you've been told you can't have. Every A grade felt like a taunt. Every teacher who called on me because they knew I knew the answer, every one of those moments felt like being handed something just before the door was slammed. 11th grade, the guidance counselor started talking about scholarships and applications. I sat and listened with my notebook open and wrote nothing down. 12th grade was the worst. Every week someone was getting in somewhere, University of Florida, Georgia Tech, Spelman, and Deidre, the real cruelty or the closest thing to it. Deidre got into the University of Miami. I heard about it in the hallway, secondhand, someone saying her name and the school's name in the same bright sentence, and I had to turn around and walk the other way before my face did something I couldn't take back. I became moody, closed, the kind of quiet that worries people. My father asked my mother what was wrong with me. She made up an answer. She had to know the real one. When classmates asked where I was going after graduation, I gave vague answers. Still deciding, maybe local. Things are complicated. One day, Damien, a boy I'd known since middle school, kind in the uncomplicated way some people just are, pulled me aside. "Cheryl, what's going on? You're not applying anywhere." "It's just not the right time." "Is it money? Because there are grants, scholarships, you could definitely get—" "It's not that." He looked at me, and I could see him trying to understand something that I wasn't going to explain. The truth was too small and too large at the same time. My father says girls don't go to college sounded like a sentence from another century. I couldn't say it out loud to someone whose future was still intact. "Okay," he said finally, "but if things change—" "I know, thanks, Damien." We graduated. Deidre left for the University of Miami. I started at Winn-Dixie. Make that make sense. The years between 18 and 20 were the worst of my life. I was still in my parents' house. I was ringing up groceries and watching people I'd gone to school with come through my checkout line. The ones who'd gone away would come home for breaks or summers, and sometimes they'd end up in my line. They always looked the same, slightly brighter than when they left, the way people look when they've been somewhere that expanded them. And I would smile and scan their items and tell them their total, and then I would go home and sit in my room and feel the walls. I got promoted, cashier to assistant supervisor to supervisor. It happened because I was steady, because I showed up and paid attention and did what I was supposed to do, probably the same reason I had good grades. Whatever I was given to do, I did it well, even when I didn't want to be there at all. My parents began hinting about marriage. They had a strange theory about this. No dating between 18 and 22, but somehow, by 22 or 23, I was expected to materialize a husband. A good one, a church-going one. They'd started scanning the congregation on Sundays and occasionally mentioning names. My grief had become a kind of low weather by then, present but unremarkable. I had stopped expecting anything different. Then two things happened within a few months of each other that changed everything. The pandemic hit, and for everyone else, the world shut down. For me, something else happened entirely. The world opened. Everything that had required physical presence, required permission to travel, required showing up somewhere in a body that could be seen and questioned, all of it came online. Classes, lectures, certifications, college courses, the whole infrastructure of education that had been just out of reach suddenly existed on a screen in my bedroom, and no one could see me walking through the door. The second thing was a documentary. I don't even remember which streaming service or what night it was. I just remember sitting on my bed and watching girls in Afghanistan being tutored in basements, or walking hours in the wrong direction to confuse anyone following them, or learning in secret at night while their families slept, not because their families were monsters, sometimes because their families were afraid, or because the pressure from outside was that immense, and those girls found a way anyway, under occupation, under terror, under everything. I sat there when it was over and felt something unlock. I didn't have the Taliban. I had a father carrying ideas that most of the rest of the world had long since left behind. That was real, and it was damaging, and it had cost me. But it was not the same as what those little brave girls in Afghanistan were navigating. And those girls had not stopped. I had been 20 years old for a few months. I had a job. I had a room with a door. I decided. I bought a second-hand computer. When my father noticed it, he looked at it the way he looked at anything that might be pushing against the edges of what he'd decided for me, with a particular kind of suspicion. "What do you need that for?" "Work," I told him. "Gloria, my manager, has been shifting me into some light bookkeeping tasks. I need to learn the software, get some practice in before I embarrass myself." Not a lie. Not exactly. He didn't like it. I could see it on his face. That narrowing around the eyes that meant he suspected something but couldn't find solid ground to stand on. He didn't want me to fail at work. He didn't want me to embarrass the family by doing poorly in a job I'd been trusted with, so he let it go. That was the crack in the stone. That was where the water got in. I enrolled in community college that same week. One course, general education. I sat in my room with my door closed, my earbuds in, and I learned. My brain, which had been waiting, which had been starved without my quite realizing how starved, just opened and absorbed everything. The learning felt like drinking water after going too long without it. I added a second course the next quarter, then a third. My parents noticed I seemed better, less moody, lighter. They decided this meant I had finally accepted my station in life and was turning my attention toward marriage prospects. I agreed with whatever interpretation they offered. It was easier. A year and a half later, I had an associate's degree in teaching, a 3.85 grade point average. In Florida, if you graduate from community college with a 3.5 or higher, you qualify for a scholarship to continue at a state university. I didn't know this when I enrolled. I found it about 6 months in, at 2 a.m, reading through a financial aid website, and I sat there for a long time just looking at the number. I applied to FIU. They accepted me. The scholarship covered most of it. My paychecks from Winn-Dixie covered the rest. I was 22 years old, secretly enrolled in a 4-year university, living in my parents' house and working a full-time job. My mother thought I'd stopped being sad. My father had started leaving church pamphlets in my room with single men's names circled in the bulletin. I kept going. The coursework was demanding, but the demand felt good, the way a muscle aches after you finally used it properly. I finished the 60 hours of preservice required to get a teaching degree. The student teaching internship was the hardest part. 12 weeks. I rearranged my shifts with Gloria, told my parents we were short-staffed and I'd taken on more daytime responsibilities. True, technically. She scheduled me for evenings. I taught mornings. I came home tired in a way that felt like something. I did it. 4 years after I enrolled in that first community college course, I had a bachelor's degree in science education. I sat in my car in a parking lot after I got the final confirmation email, and I just sat there, parked, quiet. Something big had just happened that no one else knows about yet. Around this time, Deidre, my high school competition, and I found each other again. Not through great effort, just through the slow gravitational pull of grown people who grew up on the same street. A mutual friend's birthday, then coffee, then the kind of friendship that builds when two people are past the age of performing for or against each other. She was in a master's program by then, a couple years ahead of me, and yes, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't still a flicker of that old competitive sting. She'd had a straight line. I'd had to build mine in secret, with whatever materials I could hide. There was a small grievance in that comparison that I'd never entirely put down. But mostly, I was proud of myself. More proud than I'd ever been of anything, because what she'd done had been handed to her. Not easily, I don't know her whole story, but she had never had to do it in the dark. And I had done it anyway. I told her everything, eventually. The whole of it, the kitchen table, the report card, the community college courses I took in my room with my headphones in, FIU, the degree, all of it. She listened the way you listen when someone has been carrying something for a long time and has finally set it down in front of you. "So what now?" she asked. And that was when I realized I didn't have a plan past graduation. I had spent years working toward the degree, and I had never thought past it, never thought through what came after, because the point had been the degree itself, the survival of my own intelligence, the refusal to let my brain go to waste. But I hadn't thought through how to get a job, how to get out of my parents' house, how to explain to my father that his daughter was a fully qualified science teacher. "I don't know," I admitted. Deidre thought about it. "You can't do this quietly," she said. "Not forever. You can't stay in that house and teach. At some point they'll find out. You need a plan." She was right. I started researching. I looked for desperate school systems, the places where a new teacher, no matter how inexperienced, would be welcomed rather than waitlisted. California caught my eye early, specifically the San Francisco Bay Area, a region with chronic shortages in math and science instruction, schools actively recruiting from out of state, sign-on incentives I hadn't expected. The opposite of everything I'd grown up in. Not the conservative architecture of my parents' household, where tradition and expectation shaped every move. A different culture entirely. A place where a 24-year-old woman could arrive alone and not need to explain herself to anyone. I applied to 11 schools. One in Daly City wrote back first. They had a position. They wanted me to start in the fall semester. They wanted me. I read the email 4 times before I responded. The fall semester was 8 weeks away. Deidre and I met at a coffee shop the next afternoon and talked for 3 hours. We laid out everything. The pros. I had a car. I had savings. I had the job offer in writing. I had Deidre. The cons. I had never lived anywhere but my parents' house. I had never driven cross-country. I had a father who would consider what I was about to do as an act of war. But there was one more thing I had. My parents went to Tampa every year at the end of July to visit family on my father's side. They'd been doing it every year I could remember. My brother and I had stopped going when we started working. No one questioned that anymore. They would be gone for a full week. That was the window. The school had already identified an apartment for me, a small place in Daly City, rented to incoming teachers at a rate the salary could handle. The lease was ready to sign. The drive, according to everything I'd mapped, was about 40 hours, manageable in 4 days if I pushed. I ran the plan by Deidre again, and she looked at it the way she'd looked at every version, carefully, finding the gaps. "I'll help you pack," she said. "Whatever you need." My parents left for Tampa on a Saturday morning. I watched my father load the trunk. He moved the bags with that particular efficiency of his. Everything in its right place, no wasted motion. My mother kissed my cheek and told me not to forget to eat while they were gone. My father told me to answer the phone when he called. Then they backed out of the driveway and drove away, and I stood on the front step and counted to 10 after their taillights disappeared. Then I called Deidre. She got to my place in 18 minutes flat with her car and a stack of flattened boxes. We worked fast. I didn't have much. I'd spent years in one room, accumulating carefully, not collecting the way some people do. Books, clothes, a few things from my desk that felt important. My degree, printed and framed by Deidre herself as a surprise, wrapped in brown paper. We were about halfway through loading my car when I heard tires on the driveway. Dwayne, my brother. He came around the side of the house, saw the boxes, and stopped. "What's going on?" Deidre didn't miss a beat. "Spring cleaning," she said. "Cheryl's been wanting to clear some stuff out forever. I finally came over to help her get through it." She gestured at a box on the step like it was obvious. "These are going to the donation drop-off on 9th. Dwayne looked at the car. He looked at me. "Just getting rid of stuff," I said. "You know how it piles up." He stood there for another moment, the particular hesitation of someone whose instincts are telling him something is off, but who can't find the specific thing to point at. Then he shrugged. "All right," he said. "I just came by to grab something from the garage. I'll be out in a second." He went to the garage. We kept moving boxes, slow and easy, nothing urgent. When he came back out, he waved and got back in his car and left. We waited until he'd turned the corner. Then we loaded the rest in 12 minutes flat. I pulled out of my parents' driveway before noon. Deidre had stayed to watch me go. She made coffee while I did one final walkthrough of my room. I stood in the doorway and looked at it, the single bed, the desk, the window that faced the backyard. I didn't feel what I thought I'd feel. No big ache, no wave of grief, just a clean readiness. Deidre walked me to the car. She held me for a long time without saying anything. "Thank you," I said, "for all of it." "Go," she said. "Call me when you stop for the night." I drove. The first few hours I was waiting for something to go wrong, for my phone to ring, for traffic to swallow me, for some practical disaster to interrupt what I was doing. But nothing interrupted. The road was clear, and the morning was already warm, and I just kept driving, and somewhere around the 3rd hour, still in Florida, something in my chest began to loosen. Then my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Dwayne. I let it ring. He called again 20 minutes later, then a 3rd time. I watched the screen light up on the passenger seat and kept my eyes on the road. I knew what had happened. I had known it might. He'd gone back to the house, something he'd forgotten in the garage or just a feeling he couldn't shake, and he'd walked through the front door and down the hall and stood in the doorway of my room, the bare mattress, the empty desk, the walls with their small, pale rectangles where things used to hang. He had called our father before he'd even finished looking around. My phone rang a 4th time. This time it was my parents' number. I let it ring. Then, 20 minutes later, my father called from his cell phone. I stared at his name on the screen for 3 full seconds. Then I answered. "Dad." "Where are you?" "Not a question." "I'm driving." "Driving where? Cheryl, where are you?" "I'm on the road. I'm safe." "Come home right now. You turn that car around and you come home." "I'm not coming home, Dad." "Cheryl, I'm safe." "I'll call you when I get where I'm going." I kept my voice steady, even, the way I'd kept it steady my whole life in that house. "I love you." I ended the call. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I gripped it tighter and kept driving. He called 6 more times before dark. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't know which state Dwayne was willing to drive to. I didn't know how far my father's reach extended. I only knew that I needed to put miles between myself and everything behind me, and so that's what I did. I'd never driven anywhere alone before. Not like this. Not with all my things behind me and no one expecting me somewhere. It turns out that kind of alone feels different from the kind I'd been living. The kind in my room, at the grocery store, at my parents' table. This kind of alone had air in it, but there was fear underneath the air. Every pair of headlights that came up behind me on the highway and stayed there too long made something tighten in my stomach. Every time a car matched my lane change, I'd watch the mirror until it passed. I knew it wasn't rational. Dwayne didn't know which road I'd taken, didn't know my route, didn't know which direction I'd even gone. But the fear doesn't negotiate with rationality. I had spent my whole life with my father's authority as a fact of the universe, and facts don't dissolve just because you've crossed a state line. I drove through Georgia. I stopped at a roadside motel that night, called Deidre, and told her about the calls. Dwayne went back, I said. I figured he would. She didn't sound surprised. Are you okay? I'm still driving tomorrow. That's the answer I wanted. I ate bad food from a gas station, slept deeply despite myself, and started again at sunrise. The second day was harder. I caught myself checking the mirror more than I needed to. My father called twice more. Both times I let it go. My mother called once, and that one I almost answered. Almost. I sat with my thumb over her name for a long moment before the call dropped to voicemail. I listened to the voicemail that night in a parking lot outside a rest stop somewhere in Louisiana. Her voice was quiet. Cheryl, baby, please just let us know you're safe. That's all. Just let us know you're safe. I texted her 2 words. I'm safe. She didn't respond. My father called 11 minutes later. I turned the phone face down on the seat and pulled back onto the highway. The next day, after I'd been on the road for about an hour, a police officer called me. I almost didn't answer, unknown number, but something made me pick up. Is this Cheryl Matthews? Yes. Ma'am, I'm calling regarding a report filed by a John Matthews in Florida. He's reporting his daughter as a runaway. I pressed my lips together. How old are you, Ms. Matthews? 24. A pause on his end. I could almost hear the conversation he was going to have with my father. I see. And are you there of your own free will? I am. I'm moving to California for a job. I'm a teacher. I have a lease agreement and an employment contract. Your father also made a claim, he said carefully, that you may not be of sound mind. I exhaled very slowly. Officer, I have a 4-year degree with a 3.7 GPA and a signed contract with a public school district. I can send you whatever documentation you need. That won't be necessary. Another pause. I'm going to call your father back. I'll let him know that you're an adult, that you've confirmed you're there voluntarily, and that there's nothing we can or will do. Thank you. You take care of yourself, Ms. Matthews. I set the phone down and realized my whole body was trembling. Not from fear, but from something that happens when the force that has governed your entire life hits a wall and stops, and your body doesn't know yet what to do with the silence where that pressure used to be. I stopped the car for a few minutes and stared at the sky until the trembling stopped. The next day, something shifted. The landscapes had changed. The thick green of the south had given way to something drier, wider, more open. The sky was different out here. Bigger somehow, or maybe just less interrupted. And the fear in my stomach had begun to quiet, not because I'd reasoned it away, but because the miles had done what miles do. They had made the thing behind me smaller. I stopped checking the mirror so often. I started listening to the radio. On the 4th day, I crossed into California. I don't have a word for what that felt like. I've tried to find one. The closest I can get is permission, as if some authority I hadn't known was watching had finally said yes, and the yes was coming out of the landscape itself. I cried a little, not from sadness, just from the pressure of something releasing after a very long time of holding. I found the apartment. I parked. I sat in the car in the parking lot with the engine off and just looked at the building that was going to be mine. Small, bright, facing west. Dwayne hadn't found me. My father's voice was in my phone and not in the room. I had driven over 3,000 miles and arrived in one piece. I got out and went to get my keys. I called my parents the evening they got back from Tampa. It was a Sunday. I sat on the floor of my empty apartment with my back against the wall and the phone in my hand. The furniture wouldn't arrive until Tuesday. I had a sleeping bag and an air mattress from a sporting goods store, a bag of groceries, and my framed degree propped against the opposite wall. My father answered, "Hi, Dad, I need to explain." A pause. "I'm in California." Silence. Then, "California. I've been taking college courses for the past 4 years. I have a degree in science education. I have a job. I'm going to be teaching at a middle school in the Bay Area. I start in 2 weeks." The silence stretched out longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped into that register I had feared my entire childhood, low and controlled and very cold. "You have lost your mind." "I haven't, Dad. After everything your mother and I have done for you, everything. We kept a roof over your head. We fed you. We gave you everything you needed. And this is what you do. You sneak around behind our backs like a criminal and run away like we were something to escape from." "I wasn't running away from you. I was running toward something." "Don't talk back to me." A beat. "Do you know what people are going to say? Do you have any idea the embarrassment you have brought on this family? On your mother? People at church are going to ask where you are, and what am I supposed to tell them? That my daughter ran off to California? That she decided she knew better than her own father?" "Dad!" "Good girls don't do this, Cheryl. Good girls don't lie to their parents for 4 years. Good girls don't sneak and scheme and disappear without a word. Whatever they taught you in those classes, they did not teach you respect." I let him finish. My jaw was tight. My free hand was pressed flat against the floor. "I wasn't sneaking," I said when the space opened up. "I was surviving. There's a difference." I could hear my mother in the background now, her voice low and urgent, asking questions. His hand must have gone over the receiver because the next few seconds were muffled. When he came back, something in his voice had shifted. Harder, if that was possible. "You are throwing your life away." "I'm starting it." He hung up. Dwayne called 3 days after that. "You're in California." Not a question. The same tone our father used, certainty wearing the shape of curiosity. He said the word California, the way you'd say another planet. "Cheryl, what is wrong with you?" "Nothing is wrong with me." "You left without telling anyone. You gave Mama and Daddy no warning." "If I'd warned them, they would have stopped me." "Maybe they should have." His voice had that older brother weight to it, the authority of someone who had always been allowed to leave, who therefore didn't understand what leaving had cost me. "You have responsibilities here. You have family." "I have a life here. I have a job here. Dad is... I know what Dad is. Dwayne, I love you, but I'm not coming back, and I'm not explaining myself to you either." I kept my voice level. "I'll be in touch." He tried to get my address. I didn't give it. He somehow got Deidre's number. I still don't know how. Called her twice. She told him she hadn't heard from me and didn't know where I was. Then she texted me a screenshot of the call log and added, "He tried it." My parents called for weeks. Every few days a rotation, my father firm and cold, my mother soft and mournful and effective in the way that softness can be more cutting than anger. "Cheryl, we are your parents. Cheryl, who raised you. Cheryl, what are people going to think?" The guilt was not nothing. These were the people who had fed me and clothed me and shown up to every school awards night. The love was real. It had always been real. It had just been wrapped around something that was slowly suffocating me, and I had needed to get out from under it without destroying the love entirely. I wasn't sure yet if that was possible. I knew what my leaving had done to my mother, could hear it in the way her voice went careful and small on the phone, the way she asked about whether I was eating, whether I was sleeping, whether I had people around me. She had not been my enemy. She had been a woman who made her peace with a life she hadn't entirely chosen, and who had tried, within the limits of that peace, to protect me, that I had left her behind in that house with that man, with his anger now redirected, that sat with me in ways I hadn't expected. There were nights when I sat with the phone after hanging up and felt the weight of it, the genuine love buried inside the control, the way the two things were so wound together I couldn't separate them. But I had spent 24 years under the weight of their expectations, and I had come to California to become someone who could carry her own weight. I answered their calls. I stayed warm. I did not go back. The night before my first day of school, I set out my clothes. It sounds small. It was not small. I stood in my apartment, mine with my name on the lease, my plants in the window, my degree on the wall, and I laid out slacks and a blouse and sensible shoes, and I thought about the episode of the magic school bus that had started all of this, the one where everything shrinks down to the size of a blood cell, and suddenly the impossible becomes visible. I thought about Deidre, 2 years ahead of me, already teaching somewhere, always one step ahead, and how even that distance had shrunk to something manageable. I thought about my brother Dwayne, who had moved out at 23 with just one single conversation about it, who had never had to lie, who had never had to map an escape through someone else's vacation schedule. I thought about my mother, who had argued for my grades when I stopped caring about them, whose argument hadn't moved me, but who had tried. I didn't know yet what to do with all of that. I suspected it would take a long time to sort. I thought about my father. I didn't have a clean feeling about him yet. I might not for a while. What he had taken from me was real. The years of pretending, the specific grief of being excellent at something I was told I couldn't have, the moody silences my parents never understood, the Winn-Dixie checkout line and the faces of people who had gone somewhere and come back changed while I stayed exactly where they'd left me. My father had taken those years from me, but I had also taken something back. I had taken it quietly, in the dark, with my door closed and my headphones in, and a second-hand computer on a desk in a room I no longer lived in. The next morning, I drove to school before the other teachers arrived. I sat in my classroom, which was mine, which had my name on a card outside the door, and I looked at the desks, 32 of them. Empty, but not for long. I thought about what it would feel like to stand at the front of that room, to take something invisible and make it visible, to say this is how things work to a child who hadn't known that yet. I thought about a little bus going into a bloodstream. I thought about all the different kinds of education, the kind that happens in classrooms, and the kind that happens at kitchen tables, and the kind that happens in parking lots in California at the end of a 4-day drive when you realize you are going to be okay. And I thought about a future, my own future, a master's degree maybe, travel eventually, somewhere I haven't been yet, haven't even thought to imagine. The future was no longer a door someone else held the key to. It was a road. I had already proven I could drive. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe.